All right. Hello, guys. Hello, Facebook. I think we're live. Hello from Austria. Hope you can see me well. This live stream today, we're going to talk about how to get lean without having to count your calories, or without basically having to, be a slave to tracking everything that goes into your system, right? So that's going to be the topic for today. Just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. If we talk about getting lean without counting calories and counting macros and all that stuff, we have to understand somewhat also scientifically, but also just practically understand what is appetite, and relatedly, what is satiety, okay? So we're going to look at satiety and appetite, right? And we're going to look what determines satiety and appetite. And just to give you a structure for what we're going to talk about, I think this is not working properly anymore. Let's use this one. We're going to talk about food volume as a first point, which is very important. Hello, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Talking about getting lean without counting calories today. All right, we're going to talk about fiber. And we're going to talk about how hard is your food. Sounds interesting, but wait a minute until we get there, okay? So for those of you who just tuned in, we're going to talk about getting lean without counting calories. That's going to be the big topic for today. Thank you all for watching the stream. If you like the stream, give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you have any questions during the live stream, you can just plug them into the Facebook Live, and I'll try to answer them whenever we get a little break, okay? So let's get started with this topic. Why is this a topic that I'm passionate about? In the current fitness industry, there is a big hype, and it's also like a big awareness on that you have to count calories and macros, because if you know how many calories you eat and what kind of macronutrients you're taking in, you can control your body weight, you can control your body composition. And while that is true, it's a really effortful approach for a long-term fitness or a long-term healthy lifestyle, right? So I would never want a person to count calories every day in every situation for the rest of their lives, right? So usually people just eat by feel or until they're full. But for most people in our society, with all the good food we have lots of engineered foods that tastes really good, that makes you keep eating more because it's so sweet and so salty, it gets you into trouble. Because if you eat to fullness, you constantly overeat on calories. You constantly eat too much, you consume too much energy, right? So how can we prevent this? How can we basically just eat according to our body signals? How can we eat till fullness until we're satisfied and still be, somewhat at a healthy body weight and be happy with our diet as well, right? So one thing you always want to keep in mind is if you are eating in a certain way, if you're trying something out, a new diet, a new lifestyle, is this something that you can keep up for a long time? Or is it so drastic and so extreme that you basically are starving yourself and you could never see yourself doing this for a long time? If it's the latter case, then it might not be optimal, to go about it that way. It might be optimal to go for a more moderate approach, okay? Hello guys, thank you for tuning in. By the way, can you hear me well? Let me know if the sound is good in the comments. Thank you for tuning in. We're talking about getting lean without counting calories. So for those of you who just turn in. Okay, so knowing this, that basically most people overeat if they don't track what they're eating, how can we modify our food, our diet environment, so that we don't overeat, so that we automatically eat less calories, okay? So this talk is going to be focused for a person. If you are someone who wants to lose fat, to get leaner, to eat healthier, to lead a healthier lifestyle, this is going to be the topic for you, right? If you are very lean already and try to build muscle mass, probably you'll have to use these tips in reverse, because you'll have to eat more than your body needs in general. So we'll keep it for the person who wants to lose fat, who wants to get healthier without having to count calories. So before we get started with these 3 topics, a big disclaimer. If you're trying to lose fat and be healthier and be a healthier human body and mind, I would always recommend, like if you were a client and came to me and said, please help me with my, you have to look at your sleep. If your sleep is not good, if you sleep too little, if you don't prioritize sleep, then all of the things we're going to talk about today are not going to matter as much for you, because your hormonal environment is going to be so messed up that you will get hungry at very weird times, that it will make it more likely that you're overeating on a regular basis. It will make you more stressed, because if you sleep too little, your cortisol levels go up during the day. So sleeping too little is really bad for everything, essentially, right? So let's assume you get your sleep in order and you have a good mindset that you want to lose fat. Okay. So then let's dive into what your appetite is. How should we start with this? All right. Let's assume, let's start like this. Your brain basically has a mechanism, a part of the brain, the hypothalamus, that controls your appetite. Your appetite is essentially a feeling, right? So a feeling like fear or like anger that drives you to do something, okay? So essentially, if you are having an appetite or a high appetite, it's a natural instinct to seek out food. And if you don't seek out food, if you don't eat and have a high appetite, it's really effortful. So we need to learn how to manage our appetite, because we cannot switch it off. We can't just say, oh, we have no appetite, or we delete it. It's always there and we'll have to manage it, okay? So keeping that in mind, why is this important? This is important because some people have a very high appetite. So no matter what they eat, they always like to eat a lot, right? And this is somewhat genetically predetermined. So some people have a very high appetite. Some people can get away with not eating for a whole day, for example. I know some people, like my girlfriend, for example, she sometimes forgets to eat, right? So that could probably never happen to me. Like for me, it would be the reverse. Like I more likely forgot that I had eaten before rather than forgetting to eat something, right? So it's really different from person to person. For some people, it's naturally easier to not overeat. For others, it's harder. So how can we manage this? We manage this by altering what we eat, okay? So it's really hard to eat, it's really hard to lose fat by just having no plan and just going about it and trying random stuff and trying random diets and having no clue about nutrition. That's the worst thing you can do. Like before, even if you don't count your calories, you have to know a thing or two about nutrition. You have to know how many calories approximately a food contains. You have to know what are good foods for fat loss, what is not so good for fat loss. You have to know that you have to do some strength training ideally, right? Some sort of activity, and you have to sleep enough. All right, so we have quite a few new viewers. Hello, if you're just tuning in. We talk about getting lean without counting calories today. Topic that has been requested a lot. Okay, so let's get into the more interesting stuff. Okay, so food volume, the first point. I'm not sure if you can read it well, but the food volume is important because your stomach actually has little sensors that react to how much food, basically how full your stomach is. And if it senses that it's full, it sends a signal to your brain, oh, we're full, like reduce appetite, reduce appetite. It's a connection to your brain. Obviously, it's not the only sensor that's in your gut, but it's one of the important ones, right? So for this reason, we can, for example, drink water and feel a little bit satiated because our stomach is being filled up and this pressure is being sensed and we're getting a somewhat satiating response. This is, for example, the reason why sparkling water is a lot more satiating than normal water. Why? Because the sparkling water is filled with air, and the air takes up more space, literally, in your stomach, and thus making you feel more satiated. So it might help, as a first tip, to drink some sparkling water, if you can handle it. If you don't get super bloated, but it helps. For example, I do it if I'm in a fat loss phase. I drink sparkling water. It keeps me more satiated. You can also drink sparkling diet sodas if you prefer, but we'll get to that later, okay? So keeping this in mind, what do we have to know about the different volumes in foods, okay? So ideally, let's make this a new page. We'll choose foods that are very low in energy density. Let's call this low energy density, okay? Low energy density means every food has a certain amount of calories per unit of weight, okay? Like, even if we don't count our calories, it still matters how many calories we're consuming. So this is a big misconception. So just because you don't count calories, they still matter. So you can't just, for example, if somebody tells you, yeah, you can eat a low carb diet or a keto diet, and you don't have to count calories because they don't matter, that's not true. They still matter. They might alter your sensation. Might make you, the diet makes you more satiated, makes you consume less calories naturally, but calories still matter. So that's why you have to implement these tips knowing that calories are always very important. Like, how much energy are you consuming, okay? Food volume. We ideally have to choose foods that are low in energy density. Energy density can be seen as how many calories per 100 grams are in a food, okay? So for example, a food with a very low energy density would be strawberries. Strawberries contain mostly water, like more than 90% water, and they contain some fruit sugar, but it's really not much. So strawberries contain around 30 calories per 100 grams. What does that mean? That means that you can, in fact, eat a kilogram or something like 2 pounds of strawberries for only 300 calories. That's about a small Snickers bar. So why does this matter? This matters because eating the strawberries fills you up a lot more for a lot fewer calories than the Snickers bar, and thus keeps you a lot more satiated. Okay, and I'm going to talk about a few examples now that drives this really home, this concept of food volume. Okay, so for example, we know that potatoes are a lot more satiating than every type of grain food. So for example, Potatoes are more satiating per calorie basis compared to, say, rice, white rice or brown rice, or even to something like oatmeal or something, okay? So, for example, rice is a very bad or a very high energy density. That means we can eat a lot of rice without filling us up much. Whereas if we eat the same amount of calories in potato form, we have to eat a lot more potatoes. So oftentimes, simply making the switch, if you are, for example, a person who is eating rice and who is eating lots of, refined grains and refined something like wheat products, bread, or anything similar to that, if you just switch that out with potatoes, you would naturally consume a lot less calories for the same sensation and for the same satiation response. So, yeah, let's just call this grains versus potatoes. Okay. Hey guys, for those of you tuning in, you can ask questions at any time. I'll try to answer them later on. And let's dive more into why food volume matters. So that's why the old saying on a fatless diet, eat more fruits and veggies. Like your grandma says, eat more fruit and veggies. Why does that make sense? It makes sense because fruits and veggies they contain a large volume, but very, very low calories. Okay. So I often get asked the question, but Thomas, isn't it bad to eat a lot of fruit, or isn't it bad to eat too much vegetables? And the answer is most likely no, because even if you do consume lots of fruit and vegetables, you might have probably a bloated stomach because you ate so much food, but you're not going to gain weight, or it's not going to be unhealthy for you. So for example, I myself regularly eat, lots and lots of fruit, and vegetables. So for example, I could easily eat something like 1 kilogram of strawberries in one meal, right? So it's very, like if you're tall and large, it's very easy to consume lots of weight in terms of food, even without consuming lots of calories. So that's the key. Like think volume, think foods that are big, filling, large foods that contain little calories. And that is why you have to know about nutrition. So if you go to a supermarket and around the outer spaces, usually you'll find fruits and veggies. Fruits and veggies are big, are bulky, and they take up a lot of space in your stomach. They're also often very effortful to chew. Right? In terms of vegetables, a good example would be something like broccoli or something like green beans. They have insane amounts of filling potential without, without even being possible that you overeat on them, because you would be so full that you literally can't eat more of them. Okay. So in terms of food volume, you want to look at your diet and see where can I switch out more voluminous food. So if you say, okay, I don't want to make a too drastic change in my lifestyle, I'm fairly happy, but I want to lose some weight, then you can also just reduce. For example, if you like eating rice, it's not like you don't have to eliminate it completely, right? That would in some cases be not even necessary, but you can just eat a little bit of rice, but then add, instead of half the portion of rice, add lots of potatoes or veggies to that meal. Why? Because it makes it a lot bigger, the meal. The meal is a lot bigger, a lot more filling. But in terms of energy, how much you basically consumed from your energy budget, you didn't go over, right? So think not necessarily, I have to leave out this food, I have to leave out the other food, oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. Rather think, what smart foods can I include that really are actually quite delicious, right? Something like strawberries or peaches, very low calorie, very delicious, to eat, just like that, to add to your meals so that you like literally feel super satiated and nicely full, right? And the last thing about food volume would be drink lots of water. And as we talked about before, you can drink sparkling water. So the fizzy water, the sparkling water, is a lot more satiating than normal water. Okay. All right, we have quite a few viewers now. Hey Ezra, hey Sanjita, hey Rayat. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce the names right. It's not my native language, so I try my best, so correct me if I'm wrong. All right, do we have any questions? Okay, so Rika asks, so more salads, broccoli is extremely satiating. Not sure if you can see me. Yeah, essentially, yeah, exactly. More salad. So for example, a lot of people just can eat like their regular meals, like whatever they prefer, just keep it sort of at a moderate calorie level, and then just add more veggies, add more salads, right? So they get full a lot longer and don't overeat later on. That's a big point. Like we're going to talk about this later on, how you can structure, for example, if you want to lose fat, how you can structure each day so that you automatically lose fat, right? So Pramila asks, which fresh fruits are advisable then? Basically anything that is in season in your country and that you can tolerate well. Like if you don't, for example, if you can't tolerate eating oranges because it upsets your stomach, don't eat oranges. Eat apples, eat bananas, something that's low calorie but still fills you up, okay? Yes, Arika, watermelon is, yeah, it's a good choice. Like lots of volume and very little calories. Exactly. So we'll go over to why fiber is important. So we talked about food volume. Before we get into fiber, let me tell you like the story of why this is so sort of why I'm so passionate about this. Things that when I was younger, so my early 20s or my late teens, I was really out of shape, and I basically ate whenever, whatever, and was fairly chubby. Like couldn't do one push-up, couldn't do one pull-up, was really completely out of shape. And then I basically was super confused about all the diets out there, and I thought I had to learn like every bit of, you know, perfect diet and match it and make it super complicated, and was super confused about all this information and was counting calories exactly and everything. And while that helped me losing weight, it really somehow didn't work in the long term. I then gained back the weight, and I really had to find a way of eating, of including certain foods, of changing my lifestyle so that I could effortlessly keep the weight off. And the lifestyle changes were essentially a good training, a good weight training regime, good weight training plan, and a sort of outline, a sort of structure of certain foods that I include in my diet so that I don't overeat later on, right? I still eat lots of delicious foods. I go out to eat. I go out to eat good dinners. I eat some cheat foods, quote unquote. And you can all do that if you know about nutrition, if you know enough about nutrition. All right, second point, fiber. So hey, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about how to lose weight or how to get lean without counting calories. And we're at the second point, which is fiber. Fiber, super important. What is fiber? Fiber is essentially a type of carbohydrate that is literally something that sits in your stomach. If you eat it, it sits for a long time in your stomach, and it actually cleans your gut. It acts like a cleaner for your gut, and it keeps you full a lot longer. If you eat fibrous fruits, you're gonna be a lot less likely to eat more or to eat too much in the next meal. Why is that important? Each meal builds on the other one, right? So if you eat a crappy meal that's not satiating at noon, then you're going to be super hungry later in the afternoon or at dinner. So every meal that you eat matters, right? So fiber, what does fiber do? It fills you up. Fills you up. It is good for your health, right? So it's good for your gut health. And it's a bit tricky to get enough fiber if you don't eat fruits and veggies. So that's why I always recommend eating fruits and veggies. So let me just say, like many people recommend, for example, to eat lots of grains and whole wheat breads or something to get their fiber in. And while that's okay, the thing is about breads and about grains, that's like something like oatmeal, there is no problem with them, but it's very easy to overeat on calories on those foods. So you can get your fiber either from quite calorie dense and high calorie foods like bread, or you can get them from simply veggies or fruits. And the most fibrous veggies, for example, are something like celery, broccoli, green beans. Anything that's like green and low in calories is usually also high in fiber. So if you eat just lots and lots of veggies and lots of fruits, like it's really hard to overdo it on veggies, because I usually recommend people they eat as much as they like. Like you have to be careful with certain cheat foods, right? So that you don't overeat. But with veggies, you just, you can just eat until you're satisfied. And if you eat a lot of veggies and fruits, you usually get enough fiber in the day. How much fiber should you consume? The general rule is around 10 grams per 1,000 calories you consume. That means if I consume 3,000 calories in a day, I should aim for at least around 30 grams of fiber. You can also consume more. If you, however, consume extreme amounts of fiber, you can get problems with your digestion, but you can also get used to it. So that's why it's always a bit of a thing that you have to experiment with. Okay. Hey, Prabhas. Yeah, I can bring the board a little bit closer. I'm not sure. You can do it like this. Perfect. So we're talking about fiber, and why is fiber important? Fiber is important because it fills you and it's healthy for you, and it's basically just a win overall to eat it. I would note here that not grains, but fruits and vegetables. So get your fiber from fruits and vegetables. And I have to put this up here. All right. This light looks a bit weird in the background. Yeah. Hey guys. Hey Shalendra. Hey Sarika. All right. Hey JC. All right, so let's go over to the next point. The next point would be, if we already consume a lot of voluminous foods and a lot of fibrous fruits or foods, we can also look how hard is our food that we're consuming. So let me explain what this is. So in the more scientific term for this is viscosity. How viscous is your food? A really good example of this is, you take milk, 100 milliliters of milk. That's, depending on the fat content of the milk, it's something like 60 calories. And it's completely liquid, right? So you can, boom, just drink it like that and it's gone. You can have the same amount of calories and even the same amount of food type in, say, something like a yogurt. Yogurt, normal yogurt, that's made from like a full-fat yogurt, has the same amount of calories per 100 gram in that case, but it's a lot more filling just because the consistency, the viscosity is a lot higher, right? The texture is a lot thicker. And if you go even more upward, you have something like cottage cheese, which is really tough to eat. You know, if you try to eat lots of cottage cheese, you're going to be full a lot sooner than if you were to consume lots of milk. So that's why I always recommend not drinking any liquid calories whatsoever. Because if you drink liquid calories, it's so easy to just, you know, get the calories rolling, and it's really hard to control calories. So for example, I had the example of a client who had the habit to go to a sort of a health place and to drink a sort of smoothie type of health shake, right? Every morning, every sort of for brunch. And the health shake did not only contain fruits or veggies, but also something like lots of fat, like I think nut butter they put in there, and some cream, and it's like to make it more tasty, you know, they put in lots of calories. So this shake actually probably contained something like 600 or 800 calories and was not that filling. Like obviously it satiated in the moment, but it just went down, and then the client later on had lunch and everything. So this is an extra 600 or 800 calories that you just consume just like that, which you could have eaten with a big, huge ass meal, like with lots of veggies and lean protein. So oftentimes making the change from, okay, where am I getting my calories? Like, is it in liquid form, or am I actually eating the calories? Is one of the biggest things. Right? If you're drinking something like sodas, just don't, right? You can drink diet soda or something, but if you drink sodas or fruit juices or lots of milk, if you want the fruit, like eat the real fruit and don't drink the fruit juice. And if you like milk, then you just have to monitor. Like you can add a little bit to your coffee, for example. That's usually fine, but it's very easy to, you know, consume hundreds of milliliters of milk, which adds up lots of calories. So that's an important consideration. Hey Priya, hey Pratibha. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. You're asking which veggies are rich in fiber. You don't have to know the exact. There are some veggies who are higher in fiber and some are lower. The thing you can remember is just every green vegetable, such as broccoli, celery, green beans, anything that's green and usually considered healthy is high in fiber. And fruits are a bit lower in fiber, so the highest fibrous fruits are something like raspberries, strawberries, like every berry, and apples and bananas and oranges are a bit lower in fiber. So the highest ones are definitely the green vegetables like lettuce and celery. So just I usually suggest my clients they just choose a veggie or mixed veggies that they like, and then just include them like as much as they want in their meals, right? So yeah, Sarika, exactly. Just eat your calories and don't drink them, right? That's actually a good catching point, like eat your calories. Okay. Eat your calories, don't drink them. Okay? Very important. Another consideration is that your brain, like that's for the nerdy people, like if you like that kind of information, if you actually eat something that's effortful to eat, your brain actually registers that you have eaten a lot more. So it actually sends more signals to other parts of the brain that make it so that you get satiated. The satiation response is just hormones that are being sort of released in order for your body to make you stop wanting to consume food. And they get released more if you chew a lot, right? So that's why it's a lot more satiating to eat the cottage cheese compared to the milk. Another example would be a whole apple compared to an apple mousse, compared to an apple juice, compared to just water, right? That would be just the level of how hard your food is. So, taking all of this together, what are the most satiating foods to include if you don't want to count calories? The most satiating foods, and I'm not sure how this is being perceived, but I found that the most satiating foods with client experience and everything are the foods that are usually considered the paleo type of foods. So obviously a food, like if you consider certain foods paleo or not, like that actually doesn't matter, because you don't have to eat paleo or not to lose weight. Like you can lose weight with any type of diet. But most paleo, like foods considered paleo, are actually really good to include in a sort of a calorie tracking free diet. And what is that usually? That's usually a protein source such as meats, right? Usually lean meat such as pork, beef, anything of that type. That's poultry, right? Chicken, lean chicken ideally, any sort of actually lean animal protein. That's eggs. For a protein source, that's also what I always recommend is cottage cheese or yogurts, right? So cottage cheese is, I think it's actually not a true paleo food, like the ancient sort of tribal man would not have eaten yogurt or cottage cheese, but that's why you have to think for yourself, right? So in nutrition, just think, is this food worth it eating or not? Does it have protein? Does it satiate me? Is it worth eating in my diet? So I usually recommend, if you construct a meal, so let's say, okay, what do I eat now for lunch? Choose first a protein source, one of these, for example. There are lots more, like if you are vegetarian, you can also include soy products, etc. But choose a protein source, and secondly, choose a fiber source or something that fills you up. So basically, I usually recommend mixed veggies, or even potatoes. Potatoes are a bit higher in calories than veggies, so you have to pay a little bit more attention there. But you know, just if you don't count your calories, don't get paranoid with amounts in terms of veggies. Like don't try to micromanage how many veggies you eat, because usually your body should work in a way that if you eat natural foods, like by natural I mean mostly sort of unprocessed paleo-like foods, your body should actually regulate it so that you're at a healthy body weight. So that's what basically people who live in nature, they don't have an obesity problem. They always eat to fullness. They always eat until they're satisfied, and they're not overweight because they don't have like the super hyper engineered tasty foods that we have. So that's our problem, right? So don't like micromanage the amounts of veggies. Like it's okay to just, you know, be lenient with your veggies, just eat them. Mixed veggies, potatoes. If you have something like a more of a sweet type of meal, like if you don't want to have a salty meat and veggie type of meal, something like a yogurt, you can add a protein source, something like a Greek yogurt or any type of dairy product that is lean and, you know, you basically enjoy. Then just add the most satiating fruits. The most satiating fruits are strawberries, peaches, and yeah, basically other berries that you like. So apples and bananas are not as satiating. Oranges are also very satiating. It sometimes also depends on the individual. So you'll find probably that maybe for you an orange is more satiating, like it fills you up a lot faster than an apple. So you can experiment with that. But if you do decide to implement basically these foods, mainly, right, you can still eat somewhat more cheaty foods, right? If you want to go out with your friends, okay, you can do that, but then make sure that at the other meals, you really fill up with those types of foods. And the thing about it is that you want to have a measure, like if your mindset is to lose fat, you want to have a measure of if what you're doing is working. So I usually recommend you either weigh yourself, but more importantly, measure your waist circumference. So every couple of days, usually once a week, you take your waist measurements and see, did what I eat make my body weight or my body fat rather go up, or did it make it go down? And if you find it stayed the same, then you'll have to change something else, right? So then you have to reassess, okay, what was I eating? Where can I make more adjustments so that I eat more voluminous food with even less calories? Or did I go out to eat too much, right? And all these things play together. All right, let's answer some questions. Okay, Lavina asks, you tend to add calories in juice than eating, plus it lacks fiber. Yeah, exactly. The calories in juice, if you drink an orange juice that's just pressed oranges, you take away all the fiber and it's literally pure fruit sugar and it satiates very, very little, right? So, yeah. Pravas asks, fruits has fructose. Doesn't it hamper the fat loss as it spikes the insulin level, though they have fewer calories? Yeah, that's a good point. Like, research now finds that no matter how much insulin a diet produces throughout the day, or how much your insulin levels fluctuate throughout the day, if your calories are on point, then you still will lose fat. So calories are the number one thing. The only thing that insulin, like controlling your insulin does, is it really helps with appetite management. So if you have extreme insulin spikes, that can make it hard, that can make you hungry a lot faster again. So that's the only thing that's considered negative about having high insulin, So, but don't worry about insulin too much. Like, fruits and veggies should never be considered unhealthy or bad for fat loss because they spike insulin. Like, what else spikes insulin? Meat. If you eat lots of protein-rich meal, that spikes insulin like crazy. Yet people don't talk about it because protein is healthy and you need it, right? So, like, people have gotten lean on eating meats and veggies forever, right? So don't focus on that. Hello, Shruti. Hello, Gopal. How my TEE changes if I walk more than 6 hours a day and not lifting weights. Well, if you walk 6 hours a day, you can probably eat a lot more food because you're literally probably burning twice as much calories as you would usually. So you can lose weight with that, but I recommend at least 2 or 3 good whole body strength training sessions a week, just because if you lose weight, you want to either keep or gain muscle mass. First of all, you look better, and second of all, it makes it easier to stay at a sort of a healthy body composition. Then Pratibha asks, which is better, low-fat or full-fat cottage cheese or dairy? It always depends on the context. So you could, in theory, eat full-fat dairy, but for some people, it's really satiating also, but obviously it contains more calories. So on a purely sort of free of tracking diet, I usually recommend you just go with a fat-free dairy, right? You go with the most satiating foods for the least amount of calories. So a typical meal for me would be a super low-fat dairy, cheese type of thing, and lots of fruit. That's something like only a few hundred calories, but it's really satiating. It really fills you, right? And you'll obviously have to experiment and find what works for you. And yeah, Sarika, exactly, depends on your macros. If you are counting your macros, you can also eat ice cream in theory, right? So as long as your calories are okay, you can fit every type of food in your diet. But if you don't want to count calories and just want to eat until you're full, you'll have to make sure that you only eat foods that don't make you overeat. Like, I could never, ever eat pizza or ice cream just like, without having any idea how many calories they consume, without gaining lots of weight. So it really depends on your goals, and if you want to try out a more like lenient approach and not track your macros for a while, so you'll have to track your body composition, how it changes. Maybe you'll find that you can include certain foods, like certain meals, certain eating events, and employ those strategies for the other meals of the day. and you'll find you'll lose fat slowly. That's what happens with me, for example. If I still go out to eat, like eat some sort of crap food, but still eat lots of fibrous fruits, eat fibrous veggies, make lean protein my main other meals, then I'll just start slowly losing weight again. You don't have to know exactly what type of macros and calories you're consuming in order to lose weight. But obviously, if you want to make it precise and exact, that's fine. It's just a lot stress-freer if you can just eat to fulfillment. But that's a skill you'll have to learn, right? All right. Renu asks, if weighing the scale shows the same weight, but I gain in inches on my waist, what does it mean? It can mean a few things. So in the worst case, it can mean that you gained fat, but lost muscle mass or lean mass or water, and your body composition is worse than before. But sometimes, depending on how well you measure, it can also mean that you just are a bit more bloated and contain or retain a little bit more water. And it's really hard to say from one measurement. You would have to see, okay, what's going on over the weeks, and it's like measurements can really should not be taken super seriously on one point, but should be always looked at over time, right? So you don't look at one single time point and say, okay, everything is going to hell. No, you just adjust and then take a course, change something, and then see the next week again. Yeah, crab food. Crab food is everything that is not satiating, super tasty, super high calories. So something like ice cream, pizza, yeah, anything that's considered a cheat or a crab food, right? Yeah, Sarika, I saw your question. So more paleo, yeah, and less processed foods. But we take cheese in our diet, which is again processed. Yeah, the thing is this, that not all processing is bad. Like, don't take it too strict, right? So, for example, lots of meats, or what would you say? Something like many foods are really like there are many steps towards processing them, but they're not considered super unhealthy. For example, something like whey protein is super processed food, but it's really just the protein taken out of milk, essentially, right? So don't think that just because something is processed, it's bad, but you generally want the more nature type of foods, like those that are actually you would find like out in nature, right? All right. Some more questions. Sarika asks, body fat calipers are a better way to measure improvements than tape measures. Definitely. It goes like the hierarchy of how good you can measure your progress is the scale, because the scale is just, okay, it's a good indication, but we don't know exactly what's going on. The next best thing would be just waist measurements. And third thing would be something like calipers and even something like a DEXA scan, right? So where in the clinic, they measure your body composition. Renu asks, what are paleo foods for vegetarians other than soy? Well, don't think about paleo foods, think about lean protein sources. And lean protein sources can be something like tofu, works for a lot of people. So sort of the normal tofu that is not like added with lots of stuff. So tofu, soy, hemp protein works for a lot of people. If you are a vegetarian, like I know many vegetarians and vegans, they supplement with something like a rice or pea protein powder. But other than that, eat lots of veggies. So that's fine too. You know, you just don't think too much think about what foods are the most filling. Don't necessarily think, does this contain lots of carbs or fats? Think about calories and is this filling? That's more important. Like, obviously, you have to have your protein, but the density is a lot more important. Gopinath asks, polycystic ovary syndrome kind of issues at times doesn't allow highly processed, high GMO foods. So better stick with healthy eating. Definitely stick. Yeah, the thing about healthy eating is it always, you can talk a lot about it, but at the end, you always, like, even with science and everything, you find that the more healthy foods people include in their diet, like fruits, veggies, and just lean proteins, and don't do anything crazy, the healthier people become. So Pratibha asks, is there any type of food that shouldn't be consumed together? Like in India, they say never eat citrus fruits along with milk. Yeah, I've heard of those claims, and they're especially prevalent in India. I don't know about any scientific research that investigates this like systematically, so that looks at, okay, is this a fact or is this just anecdotal evidence? We don't know exactly. And I would personally, like, I recommend my clients just go with what feels best. Like, I don't necessarily separate citrus fruits from milk if the client or the person I'm consulting likes to do that. So, for example, if somebody likes to have some milk with fruits, I'll let them have them. Like, I know of no reason, no good reason to say no, don't have that, because for whatever reason, like if it upsets your stomach or something. But what you definitely want to pay attention to is there are certain foods that some people don't tolerate well. So it might be that you really don't tolerate eggs well. So don't include eggs in your diet. Find some other protein source, right? So you don't, there are no must-have foods, right? So you just always want to view your nutrition sort of as a big engineering experiment. You find something that works, and if you eat a certain way for a long period of time, you see the changes. And if it works, it works. If not, change one thing and then see again after a week what happens. So basically like a scientist. All right, so let's talk a bit more practical, what you can do on a daily basis. So what I would recommend, if you want to try out to not track your calories for a while, eat 3 to 4 meals a day. If you eat a lot more meals than that, it can be easier to consume too much food. Like if you eat 6 or 8 times a day, it can become a bit of a hassle, you know. Look at what you're currently eating. And then add or replace foods that are higher in volume and lower in calories. For example, if you drink your calories on certain meals, leave the drinking calories away and add real fruit, for example, instead of a fruit juice. Another thing you can do is if you like to eat eggs in a meal, like a couple of eggs, you can just add lots of fibrous veggies to it in order to make it more satiating. You'll be hungry a lot less the next time you eat without having consumed lots of calories. So get in the mindset of what voluminous foods can I add so that I'm super satiated. Think of it like an economist. What foods can I add that really are worth the bang for the buck, right? Tempeh tofu, yeah, right. Right. For those of you tuning in right now, we're talking about getting lean without counting calories and talking a bit about food choices. Sarika asks, can we adjust liquor like wine in our diet? Some people just have to have something. Is wine okay, and how much? Again, if it's in moderation, it can be totally fine, and you can also lose fat with drinking wine. Just keep in mind that it contains quite a few calories, but if you keep it in moderation, I don't see any problem with it in general. It's just that you don't want to overdo it. The thing about wine or alcohol in general is that if you drink alcohol, the negative thing is that it indirectly can make you consume more food because it lowers your inhibition power. That's why people go crazy when they drink alcohol. They're super disinhibited and they just go crazy. And that going crazy can also make you eat a lot more food, like go after your appetite signals a lot more. So that's the negative thing about drinking wine. But if you can control it, you know, something like 1 glass of wine per day, it's not have too many calories. And if you really enjoy it, like you shouldn't feel super restricted, right? So that's the message of today. Like if you can make it so that you don't feel super restricted, then you've won, you know. If you find a way of eating that you like, where you can eat lots of food and include some bad foods or some drinks like alcohol and still lose fat, it's great, right? And it's possible. You don't have to be a slave to your own diet, right? Okay, what are you currently eating? Then we said eliminate or minimize liquid calories. Another big consideration. One more consideration is that if you work in an office, for example, or even at home, don't have foods that you don't want to eat, something like cookies or chocolates or any tasty food that you don't want to actually eat in your diet. Don't have it laying around. If you have a bowl of cookies laying on your table while you're working, your brain registers that and it constantly has to work with this sort of stimulus. That means you constantly have to execute willpower to not eat a cookie. Because the natural thing would be to just grab a cookie and eat it, right? So it's just for your brain things, survival, energy, we need to eat. So it's really effortful to not eat a cookie if it's right there at the table or anywhere in your reach for that matter. So try to eliminate those food cues you have laying around. Like make your apartment or your workplace, if possible, clean and you know, have a fruit bowl instead of a cookie bowl. Like that little change can sometimes literally make you lose fat. Like that's why I say you have key changes in your lifestyle that if you implement one change that sometimes has such a ripple effect that it makes everything else healthier and better. So for example, if you prioritize your sleep, you sleep better, you have less stress hormones during the day, which makes it less likely that you overeat, which makes it a lot easier to focus, which makes it a lot easier to be more productive during the day, which makes you sleep again even better the next day, and it's an upward spiral. So that's why don't look for big things, look for small things you can change right away in your daily lifestyle, because you never know how big of an effect they have. So don't underestimate the effect of that. All right, we have Gopinath asks, alcohol liver relation is not that great. Progress might be slowing down compared to a person who doesn't consume. Yeah, definitely. Definitely, it's not ideal to consume alcohol especially in a fat loss diet. Because the thing is, if you consume alcohol, if you consume basically ethanol, it's called, right? If you consume alcohol, then the body senses, okay, toxic coming in, something that's toxic for the body, and it burns off the alcohol and literally shuts off every other processing. So it shuts off the processing of carbohydrates and the burning of fat in order to just burn the alcohol right away. And after all the alcohol is burned up, right, that takes a lot of heat, that's why you get warm when you drink alcohol, then the other processes start, so the fat burning starts again, and glycolysis and everything starts again. So that's why if you drink lots of alcohol, it's really hard to lose fat. Not only because of the calories, but also because of the effects it has on nutrients, on nutrient partitioning. Yes, Arika, temptation-free environment can go a long way. So your environment is generally more important than people think. So keep a clean, ordered environment. It will help also with your psychic environment. Basically, you can think of your environment as an extension of yourself. Basically, it's really, really important. Okay, another consideration: if you consume lots of grains, so we have food cues, eliminate them. If you eat lots of grains, replace them with either potatoes or fibrous fruits or veggies. That one single change can make you lose fat. Simple as that, right? If you eat a diet with lots of carbohydrates and lots of fat and lots of protein, so basically you have a high everything diet, you most likely will gain weight. So I generally tell my clients, if you have a meal, make it either higher in carbohydrate or higher in fat, but not both at the same time. So for example, if you must have rice for whatever reason, have your rice, but don't add lots of fatty stuff to it. So for example, one meal will be rice with chicken, and another meal will be chicken with some avocado. Avocado is pure fat, but also very satiating. It might be that you don't overeat if you eat chicken and avocado, or only chicken and rice. But if you add the avocado to the rice with chicken, then it's easy to consume a lot more calories. So don't add crazy amounts of fat or crazy amount of carbs, right? While it's no problem to generally mix carbs and fats, it's just impractical to keep eating lots of fat and lots of carbs. So try to be a bit aware of that. And yeah, include and don't exclude. Like, try to think, what can I include in my diet that fills me more so that I don't overeat on other stuff. And we talked about that. That would be water, there would be more voluminous food, there would be things such as chewing gum, for example. Calorie-free chewing gum can make you eat less during your meals. There have even been studies that compared, like, students who eat chewing gum in between breakfast and lunch, they eat less at lunch. So very interesting fact in that case. And if you implement those things, it really makes it a lot easier if you don't want to necessarily track everything that goes into your mouth to make your body lose fat. Having said all of this, I still usually recommend to most people that at some point in their life, they do track how much food they're eating. So they do track their calories and their macros. Why? Because they get more awareness. They get more awareness about how much each food that they eat contains, so that they have actually a handle on, oh, just because some foods, for example, that are generally considered healthy, actually do contain shit ton of calories, something like nuts, right? So just because I say mostly paleo foods, if you take that literally, then you could eat something, oh, nuts are paleo, right? And then you take a handful of nuts, has 1,200 calories, you know, like insane energy density. And if you just eat nuts, you probably won't lose weight because it's so hard to overeat, right? So I had one person who just was eating mostly or lots of nuts and thought she would lose weight. And then we just skipped the nuts and she lost weight like crazy. She was eating healthy otherwise, but she was just eating lots of nuts, and that really messed up the progress. Sarika asks, like, some more questions. Sarika asks, is it true that we gain both fat and muscle if we eat carbs as well as proteins in the morning, and muscles if we eat only protein? The workout remaining the same. So you're asking, if you add carbs to your protein, do you gain fat? Where if you just eat protein, you just don't get fat and just gain muscle. No, it's not that simple. So gaining muscle, yeah, you have to eat a certain amount of protein in order to gain muscle, and you have to have a certain training, obviously. Otherwise, you won't grow muscle. Like, why would you? Why would your body adapt? But no, carbs don't make you fat necessarily just because they're carbs. What makes you fat is eating too many calories for a long period of time. For example, just because you ate too much calories or consume too much energy on one day doesn't necessarily make you fat. So consuming energy on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 over time can make you gain muscle as well as fat. Whereas if you ate the right amount of calories, so not too much, not too little, with enough protein, then you will most likely gain muscle and either little or no fat, right? Ideally. It is true that if you're an advanced trainee, like if you're really pushing maximum muscle growth, you have to go probably through a period of a bit more fat gain with muscle because it maximizes your muscle growth response if you're super in an anabolic state, in a sort of building up state. But that's a topic for another live stream. Prahiba asks, can metabolic issues in the body be fixed only by diet, or is it exercise necessary? Is exercise necessary? Usually diet is the most important thing. Usually metabolic issues literally go mostly away if you lose body fat. And losing body fat is the main driver of losing body fat is eating in a calorie deficit. And exercise, you should think of exercise as helping with that by making you gain muscle or retain your muscles and making you burn more calories and making everything, blood flow and everything better. But the main thing you want to focus on if metabolic issues pertain is eating in a calorie deficit. So make that your number one focus. And if you really have a good mindset and learn about nutrition, then it should work, right? So whatever you really focus on, still, obviously, all this stuff is not easy, right? You still have to put in the work. If you want to lose fat, if you want to have a better, healthier body, it is work. But it gets easier over time. And it really comes down to you focusing on each meal, focusing on what do you want for yourself? What do you want from your body? How do you want to feel? Like constantly reminding yourself so that when you are in a situation where you're offered the cookie or where you're in a bad mood and just think, let's fuck it, just eat everything, then the thought comes again, right? The thought pops into your mind, oh no, I want to feel a certain way, right? And that's why I say each meal and each action matters because it builds on the action before. So don't underestimate small daily things. Okay, we got 2 or 3 more questions and then I gotta run. Chitrangda asks, the role of carbs when the goal is to become lean. As you know, we have a transformation challenge, so I was on very low carbs. After that, I started increasing my calories and started adding carbs, so I can see some bloating of stomach. I just added pulses, wheat, flour, rice, and soy. During Transformation Challenge 6, I was having more greens, egg whites, protein powder, as I just replaced egg whites instead of eating pulses or legumes, wheat flour. So how can one achieve goal in long terms reducing body fat percentage and becoming lean? Yeah, well, it's a big question. So lowering your the thing about lowering your carbs is more beneficial the more overweight you are. So for example, for someone who is extremely overweight, it's better to diet on a lower carb and a bit higher fat diet compared to someone who is just a little bit overweight. Like research finds that a lower carb diet is a tiny bit better than a higher carb diet if you're very obese. But having said that, you can, if you control your intake, get lean on a higher and a lower carb diet. It mainly literally comes down to how much energy you are consuming each day. And some diets make it easier to consume less energy, just naturally, by certain food choices, by certain setups like intermittent fasting or restricting certain foods or restricting certain time periods of eating. But the thing about what you want to learn if you want to sustain a healthy body weight is once you are at a lean level, you are a lot more free to include foods that are sort of crap foods, but you just have to see how you respond. Like you have to be aware, like don't go crazy, don't go on binges, but it's a lot easier to stay lean than get lean. your body just always wants to mostly stay the same. Your body just always wants homeostasis, wants to stay how it is. The systems all strive for an equilibrium. So it really depends on the person and on the circumstances. So it's really hard to answer this question. Like, the only thing I can say is once you are lean, experiment with a few things. Don't make drastic changes, make small changes and see how you respond, and see what you can sustain. Like what sort of foods and ways of eating you can include and still stay lean. Yeah, Renwas, I had urticaria for 6 months and was asked to not eat any protein. How does this affect my body? I was taking corticosteroids during this period and gained a lot of weight. Yeah, the bad thing about not being able, or from a medical perspective, not being able to eat a lot of protein, is that protein are literally the building blocks for your muscles, and also protein, like not having enough protein in your diet makes it easier to overeat, because the more, like at a certain amount of protein, it keeps you more satiated than if you eat zero protein. You'll be a lot more hungry during the day. So it's not that protein is magic or super satiating, but having enough protein makes it easier to not overeat. So during that period, yeah, especially if you take cardio, yeah, you gain a lot of weight. I'm sorry to hear that. So I hope you're better now. And not eating any protein, for example, I would never recommend that. Even if there is a medical condition, just don't have a high protein diet. You know, if you're if the condition doesn't allow it to eat high protein, I would still eat healthy foods and not necessarily restrict all protein. Like some protein also comes naturally with stuff like beans or rice. There is protein in rice and beans, right? So I'm really not sure how to answer, in what direction I should answer this now. Yeah, Sarika, yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, right? So I hope I could answer some questions, and if you have any more questions, you can always write me a message. I try to respond on Facebook. Sometimes, like, I get lots of messages. Don't be mad if I cannot respond each and every time, but I'll do my best. And you can also let me know topics, more specific topics you want to learn about dieting. Also, please give me some feedback on whether this was too in detail, too in depth, or whether it was too broad. You know, I always like feedback, so that I know how to make my content, you know, adapt to what you like. I would appreciate that. You can also like the video, show some support. Great session, guys. It's great that you're so interactive, and we'll see you soon. And yeah, leave me a message if you're still unsure about something. All right. Have a nice day. Bye.